Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Rangers Relay. This is your infrequent roundup of all things to do with Rangers. My name is Cameron Bell. I'm from the podcast Heart and Hand, and I'm delighted to be joined by my regular co-host, Mr. Stevie Clifford of Four Lads Had a Dream. Stevie, how have you been? It's been a rough old time from a Rangers world, I think it's fair to say, since we last got together. Some interesting things that we're going to talk about. And as per with Rangers, nothing's ever boring or easy.
No, it certainly isn't, Cammy. First of all, hello everyone. Cammy, I hope you're also well. It's been the proverbial Rangers roller coaster. There's a lot to cover and a lot to go through. We said at the start when we first done this that we would leave no subject untouched. So there's a lot of things to cover today, and looking forward to getting right into it.
Before we do that, Stevie, we are recording this on Sunday evening, the day before Her Majesty's funeral. A huge loss for the nation, one, if not the greatest monarch we've ever had, and one of our greatest ever servants. 70 years of service and dedication and loyalty to our country, both here and abroad. It's been a very, very somber period, I think it's fair to say. As I say, at the time of recording, the funeral will be tomorrow. And I think all we can really do, and it'd be remiss of us not to, Stevie, is just to give thanks for such a tremendous service, decades of continual commitment to our people, and a very, very sad time and very reflective, I think, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. An extraordinary woman who gave complete service to our country. You know, we shouldn't forget that she was also a loving mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, etc. You know, she a very family-orientated person, and she served our country with absolute distinction. Nothing but absolute respect for everything that she done for this country, you know, in Great Britain. And, you know, like you echoed, Cammy, very difficult subject for everyone, you know. But it is right that we should say, you know, our condolences to everyone, to the family. And
yeah, absolutely. And listen, no easy way to move on from that, but we want to move on to the subject now of Rangers. And since we last spoke, Stevie, I think the main talking point, obviously, is our qualification into the Champions League. A hard battle, I think, against PSV in our final qualification round. A 2-2 draw at Ibrox, and then a 1-0 Antonio Cholak goal across in Holland saw us going in to the big boy table for the first time in 10 years. And I think, Stevie, it's been fair to say the couple of games that we've had so far in the group, I think, have highlighted why it's been such a difficult journey for us to be able to get there. Not pretty in terms of what we've seen thus far within the group against some very, very good opponents. What's been your thoughts in terms of, you know, the qualification, having to make that step up, having to really make sure that we could go out there with a real positive outlook against, you know, superior opposition, I think is fair to say.
Yeah, I think we've drawn some elite teams, but it's the Champions League. It's to be expected. You know, Liverpool, you know, winners and finalists in recent years. Napoli are top of the Serie A, and Ajax are Ajax. You know, we know what we're going to get there. In terms of the qualification, you know, to come past Union St Gallen after making a bit of a pig's ear of the away game was very important. That guaranteed us at minimum a £5 million parachute. So PSV was one of those ones where I think it was really 50-50. I would be tending to say, and I said it at the time, and obviously, you know, hindsight's wonderful, Cameron, but I think PSV is where we are at in terms of our European kind of stature at the moment. What we went into is a step above. Ajax away was a mismatch. We did not perform. You know, we'll come on to that in terms of overall performance. We're going through a bit of a rocky patch at the moment. Napoli at home, I thought for 60 minutes we competed really well, and, you know, we created some good opportunities, and we were unlucky in terms of the quick yellow and red card for James Sands. It wasn't wrong, unfortunately. We've recovered. Alan McGregor bounced straight back into the team with some unbelievable moments. But at that moment, as soon as we go down to 10, we can't compete because they are, a superb team, as we've seen what they did to Liverpool. So we've got to try and make sure that this Champions League journey doesn't turn into an embarrassment where we take 6 hidings and don't pick up any points. We've got to at least give everything we possibly can. And that's the challenge. Liverpool doubleheader is going to be really difficult. And the problem with that is that it comes at a time where we are under pressure a wee bit. So we have to try and get something out of it. And it seems impossible. It seems really difficult. But Ibrox Stadium at home, anything can happen. So away from home, it's going to be really difficult. But we have to, at very least, Cameron, we have to hold our own. That's the most important thing. We can't afford to take 6 hammerings because we've seen what it can do to us. We're a very fragile squad, some players more than others. But that's the price of being here. Financially, at the end of the season, we'll be in a much better place for it. And that's the challenge. The challenge is to become regular competitors at this level so that we can build up finances, get better players, and see where it takes us. But I'm not going to sit and surrender and say that it's done or it's over. But my main hope is that we show a better level of performance, Cammy, and we give it our all. And it's not a defeatist attitude, not at all. There's still points to be won. But we can't have a 4-0 capitulation as our normality. We've got to use the 60 minutes against Napoli as our normality, Cammy. I'm not sure where it comes from against Liverpool, but anything's possible in these games. What would your aspirations be from where we've came to and where we're sitting at the moment, and what you hope to see?
I think when I saw the group and I think probably like everyone, where your opportunities were going to lie, we thought, right, okay, Liverpool will probably win the group. I didn't believe there was mugs, but I felt like there was chances that we could have taken it. We had went about it in the correct manner, and I think, like most people, Stevie, and certainly a lot of people I'd spoken to when we came out, we said, well, actually, finishing third might be the preference rather than qualifying into the latter stages of the Champions League and then potentially getting, 180 minutes worth of football. If you could get into third and drop into Europa, then, you could go in an extended run again. And I think part of that thought process, and listen, I'm sure I'm not alone here, was probably because I'd been spoiled of the success of what we've achieved within Europe over the last number of years, not just getting all the way to the final last season. And so, you get a little bit of confidence into you. You think, right, well, who can come and really take a game against us at Ibrox? And I think, even back in the 90s, the big thing for us was always you've got to try and do whatever you can to win your home games, no matter the opponent. You've got to be able to try and get something out of those games. And that was going to be the difference maker. What I think we've now seen, and what I think our experience has now shown within that as well, is that you're not going to have anywhere near those types of easy games. There is a clear, stark difference in terms of quality that you're talking about playing against the manager. I think a little bit foolhardy in his comments, but I do understand what he was trying to say after the Ajax game, talking about, the millions of, hundreds of millions of pounds of difference. I do get that, and I do understand that. But for me, this has got to be the start of a new journey. If we want to be within the Champions League and we want to compete within the Champions League, this is now shown me, the first two games have shown me that it's going to have to be incremental steps. So, like yourself, I'm not surrendering. I'm not saying that, game's a bogey and then that's it. We've only played really 33% of the games thus far that we're going to, and they're going to be, difficult games. I think that they'll get harder when we get into match days 5 and 6, when theoretically it's all to play for, because I don't think anyone expected Napoli to beat Liverpool as convincingly as they did. But that said, Napoli came to Ibrox, and for me at least, for the first 60 minutes, Stevie, I felt we held our own. I thought, yeah, we troubled them. I'm not suggesting that had it continued, with us holding out a little bit longer or keeping, 10, 11 men on the park, that we would have been able to get a result. I'm not so confident on, but we took a game to them, and I think that it was a harder game certainly than they thought it was going to be for the first 60. I heard a lot of I suppose really a lot of criticism towards the referee. I don't necessarily know if I agree with that, if I'm being honest, in terms of the Sands decision for the second booking to send them off. I think that I'm still not necessarily convinced that was a second booking, but other than that, I felt he pretty much did what he had to do. Very rarely do you see goalkeepers being penalised for coming off their line and then obviously retakes, but that happened to us. So I think it was positive. I think there was signs there that we can do better. And I think what I've also it's given me more belief in, and probably just renewed the belief that I had already, was, when teams come to Ibrox, they won't want to come and play against a full, vocal, angry Ibrox that will go out there to fully back the team and fully support what we're trying to do in terms of play well, perform well, get points, really doing whatever we can within our home games. And with the exception obviously of Napoli, due to the rearrangement because of the circumstances you talked about at the start of the show, unfortunately we won't have any away fans in the stadium across there. I don't know if I'm necessarily too confident on that. I think that there will be a few Rangers fans within the ground, but we will take obviously a phenomenal travelling support, and I certainly know scores of people who are heading down to Anfield as well, in the hopes of either getting a ticket or one already sorted through some sort of means. So, like I say, I think that we've got it all to play for. Stevie, let's turn our focus a little bit then on to domestic matters. I think started pretty brightly. A difficult game, obviously across at Livy. And a fairly comfortable win against Kilmarnock at Ibrox, a very comfortable win against St Johnstone, and then came Easter Road. And I suppose really I want to talk to you a little bit around, we've seen some issues with Alfredo Morelos this season. Was obviously sent off in that game as well. John Lundstrom was sent off, albeit as it turned out incorrectly, and then it was rescinded. That was, for me, a really difficult game for us to get, but I think we made it a lot more difficult than we had to, if I'm being honest with me. Tell me your thoughts in terms of where you think that we're at domestically at the moment before we step into the Old Firm game, and obviously the Morelos situation as it was back then.
Yeah, I think at that point we were fine. If you take in terms of what we were doing in Europe at the same time, I think, heading to Easter Road, we were doing fine. We hadn't peaked. We hadn't, turned in brilliant performances, comfortable home victories. Livingston, they showed the determination that we needed. I think that Easter Road, we didn't perform anywhere near as well as we can. I think, there was handbrake on at certain points of the team. You then get the first goal, concede a really sloppy second, but show the kind of guts to get back in front. At that point, we're very unlucky with a red card decision, but even with 10 men, I would have fancied us. When it goes to 9, I think that completely rules out holding on, because it was like the Alamo for the last 20 minutes, as you would expect. And they were unlucky, Cammy, again. I've seen criticism of certain people. We're talking about fractions and trying to block a ball and instinctively kind of move in a certain way, and people jumping all over that. I think we were unlucky that day. However, we could have played a lot better, and we can play a lot better, or we think we can play a lot better. But as it's turned out, Easter Road was kind of symptomatic of what was to come domestically for the next couple of games. A couple of things stand out from that game. When we move it quickly and when we get an overlap and when we attack things, we're very good. The goal quality of the second one, Tom Lawrence's header, is exceptional. And that's where the frustration comes, because we feel that we should be doing more of that. Defensively, this trend has kind of continued where the goals have been easy and cheap. Unfortunately, Easter Road, their first one especially, was that. Their second one is going to, sometimes when a boy hits a half volley like that happens. So at this point, a point on that day, you could say fine because of the circumstances. We both know, having officiated many games, that John Lundstram is extremely harshly treated by Willie Collum. I feel that Willie Collum over officiates. I feel that he's aggressive. I don't think he gives himself time. We've seen other circumstances. Connor Goldson at Parkhead. We saw Leon King on Saturday do the exact same kind of tackle and properly get dealt with. That's where the frustration comes. In terms of Alfredo Morelos at this point, completely let the team down. Attitude-wise, when he came on, he was looking to argue with the referee. He didn't look as sharp. I thought that he was unfit. And actually, Cammy, on the Monday, I kind of had a wee bit of a pop at Alfredo Morelos in terms of his attitude towards the team and towards his teammates. At 10 men, we need everybody, and he let them down. I didn't know what was going to come next. I had no inkling that this was going to be, that Gio, in fact, shared that opinion. But it was a really ballsy move from him, because if it had backfired and we go to Eindhoven, he's basically made, a rod for his own back. But it worked out. Antonio Cholak got the big goal, got the big moment. And I'll come to Cholak, or maybe we can come to Cholak in a wee bit. But in terms of Alfredo Morelos, I love him. I think he's our best striker. I think on form, he's our talisman. I think he gives so much to the team. But at this moment in time, I think he's letting people down. I know he's getting back to where he should be, but it shouldn't have taken another jolt from the manager, another public, not flogging, but another public intervention, rather, of his character to get him back in line. That's disappointing. We're not talking about Alfredo Morelos as 21-22 anymore, so that's where it becomes difficult. I don't think it's a career Rangers ender or anything. I don't think anything like that, but it gets to a point where Alfredo needs to make sure it's his last time that he lets us down like that. I repeat what I say, he is so important to us and we all want him back in firing. But Cammy, we're now at the middle of September and he's still trying to get there, and that's a big thing. I think he's 4 or 5 weeks over where he should be, and that's disappointing and frustrating. And we need him. So with regards to how Giovanni Van Bronckhorst handled it, or handles any other disciplinary moments in the squad, I back the manager every single time. And if he's brave enough to do that, then I've got to back him. So I don't have an issue with how he done it, Cammy. I don't have an issue with what happened. My issue lies solely with Alfredo Morelos, but it isn't for me. And I repeat what I said, because I criticised him, it got a wee bit lost, and I have tried to clarify and say to people, you really need to read what's there. But it's not a career ender for me at Rangers. It's not a blame factor. It's a simple observation that we can get a lot more out of Alfredo Morelos, and he can give a lot more, Cammy. And I think at this point, we're entitled to think we should be getting a wee bit more out of him. But I don't know how you would feel in terms of, obviously, if you look at Easter Road, you've officiated the John Lundstram one. We're both going to agree. Alfredo Morelos, we're both going to agree, I should imagine. And then, how Giovanni Van Bronckhorst has handled it. You might have a different opinion.
No, listen, I think you're on the money. I think what's great about being able to try and do some recap shows such as this and being able to try and talk about the picture holistically is that, we're fortunate enough that we've now seen him getting back to where you exactly as you said there about where he can cause trouble, because he did it against Napoli. And I think with the benefit of hindsight now, I think the manager handled it in the right way. And he how many times have we never been aware of any problems, because typically it's all dealt with in-house, and I think that the manager did the right thing by making some of that public. I think the vast majority of the support, I didn't hear too many differing opinions from the support not backing the manager in terms of what he did. Of course, we have the benefit of having Antonio Cholak has come in, who I think has hit the ground running. We'll talk about him in a little bit. So I think it was absolutely the right thing to do. He let us down at Easter Road, but then equally, I thought he played very, very well against Napoli. He gave us an outlet. He won. I forget to count, but so many headers when the balls were coming, and he brought us back into play where, it's a key part of his game and probably not so much what we look to use Cholak for. So that's exactly what we wanted from him. And I think that, when we get the opportunity to see where we were from a kind of then to now situation, this is where it certainly helps us with that. And I do think the manager, handled it in the correct way. I think that the players handled it in the right way as well. It feels from what we're seeing from the group that, things are put in the past and we take it from there. But again, we've taken care of Alfredo Morelos. We have given him, contract extensions, enhancements, etc. And we've to a certain extent mothered him, because he has been a young guy when he came to us, and we did support him and we did take care of him in the right way. And that's what a good club does, right? That's what a responsible club does. But at the same point, I think that his frustrations came to the boil, and as a result of that has been exhibited in his actions. However, much as we would like to, we can't avoid talking about it, unfortunately. A trip to Parkhead beckoned after we comfortably put Queen in the South out of the League Cup and the first Old Firm game of the season. And Stevie, this was not pretty viewing. I think we were looking for a response with the game at the turn of the year in our memories. And Rangers did not turn up on this day. This is probably one of the poorest Old Firm performances by Rangers I think I can remember, certainly within very recent years. I think one of the things that we'd spoken about, Stevie, in terms of our more recent history, and we talk about the banter years and all of that kind of stuff as well. I think the problem we've had is that this is a very different sense of loss within this Old Firm game, because it just felt like we were pretty weak. There was too many times for me where I think that we looked towards the referee to be able to try and get a decision, when in actual fact you've just got to get up and gone with it. We weren't alert. We were asleep at set pieces, which absolutely didn't help us. We didn't deal with the restart of the game, whether it's from a throw-in, a free kick or whatever, and we paid the price for that. And there's a part of me which thinks that, even when you're talking about a huge financial gap that we had when we were coming through our journey against, Brendan Rodgers' team that was full of, as we've now seen, multi-million pound players, then you kind of allow the fact that there will be a gulf. But what happened at the beginning of September in that Old Firm game was not that. This was just a real lack of awareness, a real lack of strength, of unity. And again, very, very disappointing from a team that, as you've just rightly said, we know can play much better and perform much better on the day.
Yeah, sadly, the performance was disgraceful. And that's a difficult word to use. But when you're looking for them to have carried on what they've built in the last 2 or 3 games against Celtic, where I'm not going to sit and say they've had the upper hand, but they showed resilience in the semi-final to go on and be the better team and go through. At Parkhead in the 1-1 game again, they've gone on and come into the game, finished it really strongly. Arguably that day, Cammy should have and probably could have won the game in the last half an hour. And then at Ibrox in the 2-1 defeat, albeit it was a defeat, but there was positive signs as well that we were beginning to get to terms with their style. The biggest issue I had is the stuff you spoke about. None of it was a surprise. We knew that they would come 100 miles an hour. We knew that we had to get switched on. We knew that we had to get through the first 20, 30 minutes and then begin to impose ourselves on the game. None of it was different from the games that we've played them, 4 times before this year. None of that was a surprise, but it was almost like it was a surprise to those that were playing. Every single goal was a mistake on our behalf, which is really difficult for me to comprehend and understand, especially the level of mistake. To be switching off at throw-ins is schoolboy stuff. And what we saw was just a complete disconnect, but the team from start to finish. And we had small moments, Borna Barisic, who has perhaps been one of our brightest players in recent weeks, produces a lovely cross, and Antonio Cholak, if he gets a wee bit more in that header, maybe the game's different. And apart from that, that was it. We crawled into our shell. We gave away some horrendous goals. We were weak in the tackle. We didn't track runners. We didn't switch on. We lost our shape. We lost our discipline. I have issues with the team that Van Bronckhorst picked for that game. He tried to do almost a mirror image of what happened in February, team-wise, selection-wise. He was a bit bolder than perhaps he should have been, and unfortunately we were completely swamped. I don't want to get into a situation, Cammy, where on a show like this we pick out players and say that certain players are underperforming, but it would be remiss of me not to say that on this day Ryan Kent's performance was as bad as I've ever seen, and unfortunately he's not quite recovered. Glenn Kamara, exactly the same. Putting Tillman out right to accommodate people didn't work. And it wasn't something that was new, which is really disappointing from Van Bronckhorst, because having got a formula that worked, or a system that worked before, he's put in players that aren't able to carry that out. Now, Tillman isn't a guy that's going to track back. He isn't a guy that's going to dig in. It was the exact same as putting Ahmed Diallo in back in February, and he's not learned a lesson. The midfield, Glenn Kamara in there, asking to track runners and things, it's the exact same as February when he didn't perform and got taken off as well. So when you're not learning from a managerial point of view, and when a team's coming out and we're all saying, well, this has got red flags all over it, that's where I've got issues with Van Bronckhorst. I know what he's trying to do, but this isn't something that he hasn't tried before and shouldn't have learned lessons, Cammy. Now, it's all right me sitting here, a degree in football manager and knowing nothing and trying to question a guy like Van Bronckhorst. It's not like that. I'm a big fan of Van Bronckhorst, but there's certain things that he's doing which I don't understand, especially when I feel like he's done it before. So that's a big problem for me that day, as well as the team not performing, and they didn't, and individually it started a bit of a decline in certain players. I think it started with the management, wrong system, wrong individuals, and that's difficult. So I'm like you, we had some horror shows in the last 5-6 years, Marty time and everything else, and I stood there when we got beat 5-0 there, so I know how low it can be. That was every bit as bad in terms of a toothless Rangers performance. I can accept getting beat. I can't accept the labels that we had that day, Cammy.
But also, then, Steve, just before we come on to Gio, and I think a little bit more of what everyone has kind of been talking about recently, brings us on to this weekend past, which was against Dundee United. Obviously, the planned game against Aberdeen and Pittodrie rearranged due to Her Majesty. Stevie, I think the game against Dundee United, it's been interesting because we conceded 11 goals in 3 games up to this point. In both the Champions League and obviously that game at Parkhead. It's unnatural for us to be able to go on such a series of heavy losses. So therefore, I think several people, myself included, wanted to see Van Bronckhorst take the handbrake off, but able to go out there and put out a little bit of a statement. Walking out of Ibrox on Saturday, I don't really feel that we got what I was looking for, certainly in terms of a really strong performance. But it's a win, and we try and look in the positives. It was necessary. I think Dundee United are clearly going through a little bit of reformation at the moment because they are still looking to be able to try and replace Jack Ross. Liam Fox has stepped into that. He's trying to make a claim for himself to be able to get that job on a full-time basis. So, I've got zero doubt that he obviously had the motivation for his players out on the pitch, but then at the same point, even if you do get a highly motivated Dundee United team, we should still be able to deal with them fairly easily. And there was a couple of moments on Saturday, Stevie, where I just felt, as we are prone to do at times, we made it a little bit harder for ourselves than we really had to. There was maybe a little bit of sloppy finishing at times that didn't really see us put the result to bed and look to be able to try and express ourselves a little bit more. Before we step on to Gio, I do think it is worth to call out the fact that I think a good decision, I think a brave decision to start Leon King and Charlie McCann. I know that people have been calling out for more of that. I thought McCann played okay. I think some of his finishing was a little bit wayward. But I didn't think it looked beyond him. King, I think we are starting to rely on more and more. And I think the general feeling I got, and I think speaking to people after the game, etc., was, yeah, it wasn't the greatest of performances. We understand that, but maybe we just felt the result was the most important thing, and being able to get that. Now, as I said to you at the time of recording, we were doing this on Sunday evening. Earlier on this afternoon, Celtic lost 2-0 to St Mirren in Paisley. So I can't really sit here, Stevie, and say, well, listen, I'd love 4, 5, 6 goal wins. We've had a couple of 4-0s already at Ibrox this season. I think it was really about being able to try and just get the 3 points as a bare minimum, but also look to be able to try and see if we can get a bit of confidence back in the group. I just didn't feel like we managed to really put that over the line, if I'm being honest.
No, we didn't, and that's all fair. But 24 hours makes a huge difference to the mindset, and when I watched the game back, watching it yesterday, I was really unhappy. I thought it was turgid and slow. Tempo was poor, and I'll come to that in a wee second. But we created half a dozen excellent chances. Ryan Kent should score after 90 seconds. Arfield should score after 6 minutes. Then we do score, which is a really nice goal. Arfield is then in on the right-hand side after 20-odd minutes. Counter that, they had one good chance on Middleton, or a half chance, which McGregor says was feet. Second half, we go quickly 2-0 up. Ryan Kent's got another opportunity. Then we concede, and we fall back a wee bit, and there's definite issues. There's a fragility about confidence, not only on the pitch but also in the stands, which obviously gets through to them. But even after that, we create 2 or 3 opportunities. Charlie McCann swipes it at thin air when he's in front of goal. No criticism, the young man, just pointing out. And then we've got a header from Tillman that gets tipped over. So I don't think there was a lack of chances or creativity, because we've sat here before and talked about games where we've done nothing, Cammy. So I don't think it was like that. But there's a definite fragility, which you would expect. A wee bit of indecision. There was opportunities for through balls. There was opportunities for a wee bit of a braver pass that we didn't take. There was opportunities for shots at the edge of the box a lot, especially in the first half, which we didn't take either. So there is positives from that. When you look at the bigger picture, and yeah, I'm not going to lie, it's easier now, and we're all in a better frame of mood now to perhaps reflect on it. The issues that I've got again yesterday is that there was points during the game where people are standing still, collecting the ball, standing still. Too many touches. We're not quick enough. We're not moving the ball quick enough. And it goes back to what I said about Easter Road. That second goal, the goal at home to PSV when Cholak scores. When we move the ball quickly and zip it about and move, pass and move, we are a good side. We've got good players. Now, I know we missed Tom Lawrence. Tom Lawrence is a huge miss, because he's got... When we first talked about it on the first show, we said that Tillman and Lawrence were quite alike in terms of positional wise and that. But I said that I felt that Tom Lawrence had a wee bit more grit, and whereas Tillman was a wee bit more flamboyant. Now, that was based on 30 minutes of play, but it turns out that I think that's not far away from where we are. We miss the incisiveness of Tom Lawrence. He's very direct. And I think if you had him nipping about the edge of that box yesterday, you're a different team. So, yesterday's selection, I said pre-match on Heart and Hand that I thought it was negative. I stand by that. Jack, Lundstrom, McCann is overkill in that match. But I can see why he's done it. Understand why he's done it, because we're fragile and confidence is a bit low. And he admitted as such post-match, he admitted that that's where the indecision comes from, and that's where the confidence comes and stuff like that. Every single one of us wanted another 4-0 yesterday, and at 2-0, we probably started to hunt it a wee bit more than we should, and we get caught and we shouldn't. Wanted them to be a wee bit more compact in a scenario like that, and we weren't. So, there's building blocks, there's things to work on. We lose a poor goal. There's a couple of heart and mouth moments where they're kind of dribbling in the box. I don't think they were penalties, but you never know when you're 2-1 of what can happen when Kevin Clancy's the match official. They got a couple of corners late on, but defensively the last couple of games from corners and set pieces have been a lot better. They've changed that shape. So that's a progression. Gio, as much as we criticise, we talked about this yesterday a wee bit, David and I, that at least he does change. So he's moved away from zonal marking, which we're pleased about, and we've seen an instant kind of uptake in defensively. So we don't want to polish something that can't be polished. But when you listen to this, I hope that people realise that what we're saying is that it's not good enough. It's not the standards, but there isn't.
We're delighted to have partnered with NordVPN again for this season. We partnered with them last year, and they are, of course, a supporter of Rangers FC as an official sponsor there. And best of all, we can give you an exclusive NordVPN deal. If you go to nordvpn.com/heart and hand, you will get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan and 1 additional month for free, completely risk-free. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee with Nord. And look, I use this product. I would highly recommend it. I used to work in web, so I know how easy it is to steal people's data, especially if you're using a Wi-Fi system that is a shared one, or you're using 4 or 5G, then your details can be out there. With NordVPN, they're absolutely not. And there are other advantages to it as well. You can watch sporting events that maybe aren't being shown in your region. You can purchase flights from different virtual locations, and they do make your flights cheaper. This is very, very useful. What a price is in the UK isn't the same as what a price is in America or a price is on the continent. NordVPN can save you money. You can buy purchasing subscriptions from other countries at a cheaper price, and you protect your data while travelling and using public Wi-Fi. I keep coming back to that. Anyone who's at the hassle of a cancelled card will know what I'm talking about. So all you need to do is go to nordvpn.com/heart and hand, and you'll get a huge discount off your plan and 1 month additional free, completely risk-free. I urge you to do it.
In my opinion, a reason to be completely negative on it, because there is positives there. Chances created, scored 2 good goals. The overlaps of Barisic are really starting to threaten. There is issues. Player performance, I think that Ryan Kent's in a real slump of form now, which is worrying. Defensively, we're still to get the right shape. Midfield-wise, the shape isn't right either, or not necessarily the shape, but in terms of personnel, perhaps isn't where we want to be. When Tom Lawrence comes back and things that'll change. So 3 points yesterday, Cammy, as you said, absolutely vital. Do we want better? Of course we want better, but without over-egging it, and we've been able to calm down of instant kind of reaction. There's negatives and there's positives for me, and hopefully people understand what I'm trying to say there.
No, listen, I think that's totally fair. Sometimes it can be the case that you want to be able to just go out to really put teams to the sword. We've got previous with Dundee United. I think we saw, well, certainly heard as well, the disgraceful behaviour from their fans during the minute silence. So that gave us a little bit of kind of added incentive should we needed one to go out and as I say, put out a strong performance against them. It's a welcome return to a form. I think a welcome return as well, Stevie, to the fact that our fullbacks, who I don't think have been phenomenal in terms of their overall delivery across the course of this season thus far, set up both goals. So, yeah, again, it's things like that you want to be able to try and see us get back to. And as you rightly say, the improvement on set pieces, it shows that we can put some of what we're doing on the training fields into practice on the park on a Saturday as well. So yeah, very interesting to see where we now will turn to after Celtic have dropped points. It brings the title race a little bit back more into focus. I know that there's been a lot of conversations in the wider world of, well, the league's over and blah, blah. Nothing is over in September. So again, like I say, that's certainly opened that back up again slightly. We've spoken a little bit across the course of the last 30 minutes, Stevie, about the manager. He is a month shy of being here for a year, and just keen to try and get your thoughts on some of the stuff that we've discussed, whether or not it's going to be from his approach to games, how he's handled particular situations. He has come under a lot of criticism. I think some of it has been a little bit exaggerated. I think some of it is justified. We will come on to some of the wider arching issues in just a moment regarding recruitment and obviously the new signings coming in, where we're at with the current playing staff, etc. But are you feeling that Van Bronckhorst is the man that's going to be able to try and continue to lead this charge? Do you think that he's potentially got his jacket on a sugar league peg, is our favourite Scottish saying? Where do you stand with him? Now, you obviously get the benefit of being able to see him in the press matches, the press conferences, seeing him in the flesh, been able to try and get a feel for the body language, been able to try and get an understanding in terms of his exhibition of self-belief, I suppose, is probably the best way I can put it. What's your thoughts in terms of where he's at so far? A year into the job, give or take. It's had its real highlights and lowlights, I think, in some cases.
Yeah, it certainly has. I'll start by saying I really like Giovanni Van Bronckhorst. He's a really nice man to deal with. He gives you respect. He doesn't ever kind of speak down to you. I'll come to the press conferences in a wee bit. I think he leads Rangers properly. I think he's, a very good ambassador for the club and everything that you would want outside of the actual management stuff. And that's important because people will say, you're just saying that for the... It's all important to represent Rangers the right way. So managerial-wise, ticks a number of boxes. Where I have concerns are obvious ones. In Europe, I don't have any concerns over what Van Bronckhorst does. I think he's proved himself there. And I think that he... Ironically, we go to PSV and we're much more expansive in attacking than we did when we go to Easter Road. This is where the issue comes for me. Domestically, is he the right man? The answer is, Cammy, that I can't tell you he is. His away record isn't good enough. Calendar year, I think we're at 13 away league performances and we've only won 6 of them. So, it's been a few weeks since I did those numbers, so that might be slightly off here or there, so I apologise for that. But I'm sure it's 13, 6 wins, 5 draws, 2 defeats. So that's problematic. The away form isn't good enough. Not only the away form, the away performances. At home in Ibrox, we're generally fine, aside of the defeat to Celtic, and I think Motherwell 2-2 is the only places where we've dropped under them. It's not always been good, but it's been fairly comfortable. Now, I've said that I've seen the last couple of days, and this is what I think that you're right, and people have said, how many times have we played well under Van Bronckhorst? We shouldn't confuse that with the slump we're in at the moment, because I've seen over the last almost year that he's been here lots of good performances at home. St Johnstone, Dundee, just before Christmas, St Mirren on Boxing Day. These are all good performances, 2-3-0 victories, which could have been a lot more. We beat Hearts 5-0. We done well to beat Hibs. I think we beat Hibs 2-1. It was a fairly good performance and things, although it wasn't 4-5-0. We've done well at Europe, at home. So we are strong. And I don't have any concerns. My big concerns with Gio is away form. My big concern with Gio is, and I've actually spoken to this about him. I've spoken to him about this, and it's tempo. It's how we start games. It's how we start away games that's a big issue for me under Van Bronckhorst. If he can somehow rectify that, then I'd like to think that as the squad begins to settle down, which it will over the next month or so before we then hit the break, he'll get a better idea of where he is. Selection-wise, I've got issues with what he's doing. I think he's got blind spots for some players, which, it's so easy for me to sit here and say I would do X, Y, and Z. You've got to try and trust him. But I think there's players there that shouldn't be playing and perhaps need to come out. There's now a depth of numbers which he can he can call upon, which he isn't doing as well, which we'll come to in the recruitment side of it. That's an issue. So people have said that it's boring football, it's turgid football, and it hasn't been the best quality. I get that, I understand that. Away form is really where we need to pick up. I'm not of the position where I'm ready to put him out the door or anything like that. I think that would be hugely unfair. We have lost against Napoli, we've lost against Ajax, and we've lost away to Celtic. These are games that we could lose even if we were playing brilliantly at any point in the calendar year. So he's taken us to a European final. He's qualified for the Champions League. Domestically, league-wise, it's not been up to scratch yet. So that's where the issues are. I think that's a okay position to be in with regards to how you think about the manager. I think a lot of people would be sitting there going, yeah, maybe think the same. With regards to Gio and press conferences and that, as I said, he's been good. We went at Gio a wee bit. There's been a lot of criticism of fan media. We don't ask tough questions. In the last week, Mark at Follow questioned on him and his philosophy. David questioned on him on Ben Davies the other night. I questioned on his recruitment and why we had 7 new signings and none of them are starting for a big game against Napoli. So he was uncomfortable when he answered those, because I think Gio realises that there is points, but he doesn't like why. No manager, like me at my job, I don't like being questioned either. It's natural, but I think that if you watch how he responded to them, he was a wee bit irked and a wee bit kind of miffed. I've not seen that yet from Van Bronckhorst, so that was a different side to him. But he never spoke to us badly. He never spoke down to us or anything. But he was robust. He was defensive. So I get that, but it's limited, Cammy, to what we can ask. You don't want to, like yesterday. So you've actually got him sitting there admitting that we were indecisive, admitting there's a confidence issue, admitting that performances aren't up to scratch. And we've asked him questions like, how do you sort that? What do you do? How do you regroup them? How do you get the confidence back? I don't think in a position like yesterday it would have done us any favour to go and 2-foot him, to go in hard and whatever. So I took the decision not to ask him for an injury update at the end, because most of the questions and stuff we wanted to know were there. So overall, I've went round the houses slightly and I'm not meaning to, but I'm trying to be fair. It would be really easy for us to sit here and go, I think Van Bronckhorst is a dud. You can put him out because his league form isn't good enough. But that's reactionary. It's not taking everything into account. We've went through a really difficult spell of games. Champions League's going to do that. And by the way, see when we come up against a Liverpool doubleheader, it'll probably happen again. You've got Tynecastle away in there as well. Liverpool is not as important. Sorry for saying this, but it's not as important at winning at Tynecastle and then winning at home to St Mirren. If he does that, no matter what happens in the Champions League, the reaction won't be as high. We go to Tynecastle and don't win, people are going to keep saying your away record isn't good enough, we're not playing well enough, etc. We can be better, we can move the ball quicker, the tempo's got to be better, we've got to be more assured in our performances, but we have got there under Van Bronckhorst at times. I think at other times he's a wee bit defensive. So yeah, I'm still on the bench domestically with Gio, but I'm nowhere near at the point. And listen, we all moan at times and moan at games and everything else, but I'm not anywhere near the point where I'm ready to put him out the door or turn my back on him. But I think it's absolutely right, and I think it's absolutely fair to be unsure or questioning domestically where we are. I don't know what you make of that, Cammy. I'm sorry if I've kind of went around the houses a wee bit. I've tried to explain a kind of wider, not be reactive to performances over the last few weeks, but explain wider, what Van Bronckhorst brings to the table. So I hope people kind of understand that. I'm not making excuses for him domestically. We need to pick that up. But does that make sense to you, Cammy? And where are you with it all?
No, listen, it makes perfect sense. I think the reactionary element of it is always going to be there, and I think what's important is, and listen, I couldn't agree more with the whole, Tynecastle is more important than Anfield. There's absolutely no way around that. I think that it's interesting to me when we talk about how Gio approaches particular games, and I don't mean in terms of just like the personnel or whatever, because we'll come on to recruitment next. I just feel at times, if it's, someone had said to me before where he can be a very good cup manager. And I think David has made that point before, where it can feel so much like his strength is in being able to galvanise a group, that if you've got a 90-minute game that to cause an effect as a shootout, perhaps a second leg or whatever, that you've got the opportunity to be able to try and go and really achieve something moving on to the next level. That's fine, but it's transactional. And the difference between that and the league is that you can't go into like the last quarter of a season saying, yeah, all these games are now important, because whether we realise it or not, and fans will do this, right? And of course, everything's put into a microcosm because of the World Cup break this season. But, we talk about the amount of run of games that we're going to have across, the next X amount of weeks or whatever. And we do it naturally, right? We will say, well, we've got a trip to Pittodrie, then we're away to Tynecastle, and then we've got such and such at home. But, if we can get 10 out of the next 15 points, that's really important. We usually end up doing that, Stevie, around about post-winter break time. But the point I'm trying to make is that I think that Gio at times, I think it's foolhardy to say that, he's not got the dressing room behind him, all of that kind of stuff. That, to me, is where you probably see and hear the reactionary side of things, because I don't think that that's true whatsoever. I really genuinely don't. I think the players have got a lot of respect for him. I think that he does conduct himself well. I agree entirely within that point. There's been times where, and certainly I've been involved in it as well, where under Gerrard, you know that there was going to be some questions that he wasn't going to be comfortable answering. But again, we asked it anyway because it was important. It had to be said. It had to be raised at the time. I think what will be interesting, what we can come on to next then, Stevie, is now where we're at in terms of the overall recruitment. Really keen to get your thoughts on, how it's gone thus far. I think, and I will caveat this by saying, like I said before, we are in September. Nothing is over yet. And equally at the same point, I'm keen to understand if you share my viewpoint around, are you in a fair space where you can criticise or make serious evaluation on any of our new signings? Where are you at with that? Where do you see some of the players who have been able to play thus far? And overall, how do you think that the summer window has worked?
Well, I don't think it has, but I don't necessarily buy into the fact that we've signed 7 players that aren't good. So if we take Antonio Cholak, first of all, now we've finally got a guy that will hit the net, Cammy. He's there to do what he's supposed to do, which is score goals. We have said for years and years that we're too reliant on Alfredo Morelos, Kemar Roof can't be trusted, etc. with his fitness. So we have a guy now who looks like, by the way, any time that he gets a half chance, he will bury it. And I get people saying he doesn't contribute enough out of the box. Boy made a point to me yesterday in the press gantry that Antonio Cholak had touched the ball 7 times up until about 30 minutes. And my reply to him is I couldn't care in the slightest. And that's my point. Now, he's there to do what he's doing. We don't need Antonio Cholak dropping into a 10 position, linking up and doing all that kind of stuff. We need him poaching and leading the line and scoring the goals, especially when we're a bit shy from other positions. If we had Ryan Kent or we had a right side that could pitch in, then I would say, perhaps there's a point to that. But for me, Antonio Cholak has looked like he's repaid his money back already. Tapping in Eindhoven, the big moment. He's also tapped in one against USG at home. But there's the key point. He's tapping them in. And we've not had that. So I'm more than delighted with him. I think he'll hit big numbers for us. I think if you give him the ball in the box, he'll do things for us. So he's a win. He's a definite win. And he's going to continue to be a win. My issue then comes that when we came into the summer recruitment-wise, Cammy, we knew what we needed, which was the midfield needed to be strengthened. We needed a right-sided attacker. What we've got is a young boy on loan from Bayern Munich who is going to take time to truly prosper. He's a bit of a project, but looks like a fine player. A wee bit short on confidence at the moment, but that's going to happen with a young boy. He's going to be up and down, but overall, he's going to be a win as well. Tom Lawrence is going to be a win, a definite win. And then after that, this is problematic. So we've spent big money on Ben Davies. We've spent big money on Ridvan Yilmaz. We've spent big money on Rabbi Matondo. We haven't seen them yet. We needed a winger who was going to produce numbers. We haven't saw it yet. We needed a centre half to replace Calvin Bassey. We haven't saw it yet. Ridvan Yilmaz, we can understand. We needed a left back. Borner's came on to old Borner form. We couldn't really have predicted that. So Ridvan's been allowed to have time to come in. He looked all right in the League Cup game, albeit it's a League Cup game. Don't want to be disrespectful to Queen of the South. However, he looked all right at that point. So he's a bit of a project. The issue comes when we don't spend money in midfield, when we don't spend money on a right winger, when we don't spend money after the Champions League qualification, people overreact to a situation. I think we should have spent if we could have. Turns out maybe we couldn't have. Fine, I understand that. That'll come to a wee bit of something we'll speak about perhaps in a minute. If we're spending £10 million, like we have on these three guys, they need to influence the team. That's my problem. We're now mid-September. I think there's been 13 first team games so far, roughly. I've not doubly checked that. These boys haven't contributed. So we do have issues, especially when Ryan Kent's in a slump of form. Rabbi Matondo yesterday not being able to get into the 20. Let's go back to what he said during the week to me about recruitment. One of his big things he said, and one of his big reactions to that was, I asked him why none of the 7 players were playing. Did we have an issue with recruitment? And he says, it doesn't work like that. I have 2 eyes. I can see how their performances are. I can see how they train. Now, I understand completely what he's saying. He picks the right team that he thinks. However, that statement there is quite damning. Because if Rabbi Matondo can't get into a 20 yesterday, and Fashion Sakala can, and Ryan Kent isn't playing well, I mentioned Fashion Sakala, Cammy, because he's so far out the picture, but yet he's still on that bench. That's problematic for me. When he's shoehorning John Lundstrom and James Sands into centre-back ahead of our $4 million centre-back, that's problematic for me. Ridvan Yilmaz is different because Borna's in top form at the moment. He's assisting. He's doing well. He's overlapping well. He's a credible threat. He's performing well. So Yilmaz, put him to the side because I think it would be unfair to say he's a dud or he's this or he's that. Probably would have expected him to get game time, but when the boy in front of you is doing so well, you can afford him a wee bit more time and leeway. When we're getting issues at centre-back, when we're getting issues at wingers, when we're getting issues at midfield and these guys aren't contributing, that's my problem with recruitment. I understand we went early, understand we went for the Champions League. I get all that. I completely understand all that, and that makes perfect sense. But if we've got a small budget, which we have in terms of relative terms, but we did still spend 12-13 million, we've got to get the big signings right. And mid-September, can anybody honestly sit here and say that recruitment has worked well? Then when you peek into it wider, you look at January, we didn't get. Gio clearly didn't fancy the guys that have come in. There was 4 of them. There's now only James Sands left. We look back at the summer before. John Lundstrom's a bit of a given. He's worked out. So Ross Wilson's overall record, I think there's 26 signings. And if you look at them, Cammy, and if you look at them properly, because people have been looking at them saying John McLaughlin's not worth it, Leon Balogun wasn't a success, Kamar Roof wasn't a success and stuff, that is a reactionary to everything that's went on. The key thing of the 26 is, and I think this is fair, less than 50% have hit the mark, and that is nowhere near good enough for a club like us that have a limited budget and have to get it right. And when you look over the road a couple of miles and see a manager with more influence and picking players that seem to hit the mark, that's where we ask questions, because like it or not, that's what we do as a fan base. So recruitment, there's massive questions over our scouting. There's massive questions over Ross Wilson, his position and bringing players in. There's massive questions over Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's ability to bring players in. Is there wider issues further than that? We don't know. I'm not going to speculate. It would need somebody to sit down with both him and Ross Wilson and ask the direct questions. So I'm not going to throw it out there that there's things, Gio's not involved or whatever. I think Gio's got to have a say. But when he says stuff like training and performances and what he can see, it doesn't paint a very good light. We had to get it right in the summer. Our big money signings had to come in and hit the ground running relatively as well as they could. I understand Rangers, etc. The only one it has is Antonio Cholak, Cammy. So at this point in time, recruitment hasn't worked for me. Sorry if that's a bit negative. I'm sorry if it's a bit blunt, but that's where I am with it. I don't know where you are.
I don't think it's negative. I think it's realistic. I would caveat a lot of the transfer conversation because I've seen message boards, social media, etc., and a lot of this is getting put towards Ross Wilson's door. And whilst that has got a degree of merit, it's not, Ross Wilson, the only guy saying, right, well, I'm going to go out and look at, 25 players and get an understanding of what I think of and then make decisions on the back of that. And it's by hook or by crook. He has a scouting team, he has recommendations, he has contacts, and that's part of how we'll do football. There's another part to that, and again, given a bit of kind of due care and attention of the market that we can shop in. We can't, due to FFP regulations, go out and say, right, well, if we get £25 million for qualifying for the Champions League, then we'll go out and spend £25 million. It doesn't work like that. We need to be able to try and make incremental increases in terms of being able to try and work within a fairer market. That being said, Ross Wilson knew what he was coming into. He knew he wasn't coming into a club with high budget and high expenditure, and as a result of that, I think he knew what kind of market we were going to have to be shopping in. I think that from my understanding, and again, this is an absolute, nothing confirmed, this is just from what I have been led to believe at times, and talking to a couple of different people, the manager is obviously involved within the transfer and recruitment piece, but obviously has brought recommendations in terms of what the scouting team and Wilson want to be able to see in terms of improvements within the squad. And there's absolutely no doubt to my mind as well, Stevie, that part of that will be around, we want to sign this guy. We want to bring him in. We think that we can get a good deal on him. We think that we can take it from there, but he's not the finished article. And therefore, what we would need you to do as manager is work with your coaches, work with your staff, continue to develop them. Now, if we can flip them as a result of that model, then okay, fantastic. Because if we see that improvement and we get it in there, then that's fine, because that fits within what we also want to operate towards. And there's nothing wrong with that, because you may be training and developing a player who ultimately you will have to sell on. There's nothing wrong with that. But equally, I think it shows a lot for you and your coaching staff if you are able to do so. So therefore, it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Yes, you'll lose an asset, but at the same point as well, it will give you more money in your budget that can go towards your next acquisition. The problem for me at the moment in terms of where things sit just now is that, and I think you said this very well earlier on, we can see where there's clear problems right now. The right-hand side is absolutely an issue. I think that I get frustrated where we think that we should be able to bring someone in at that space and it hasn't quite worked, and people think, oh, well, it should have happened straight away. It doesn't work like that. I do understand that. The problem for me, I think, just now, Stevie, is what are we looking at that's actually going to make that any different? I am not one of these guys who just wants to have a go at Scott Wright all the time. Okay, I'm not. But at times, and I think including on Saturday's game against Dundee United, when he came on, he provided a bit of spark. That's fine, right? That's good for him, and that's what I'm happy for him to do. I think that there'll be times where no one will give him credit for some of the stuff that he does. But at the same point as well, he's not an answer to a right-sided problem. Matondo, at the moment, and that's a very big at the moment, but doesn't appear to be the answer to that. So therefore, we still have this gap. We still have this vacancy that needs addressed. And that hasn't happened. Now, I'll also play fair, because no one has a crystal ball and no one's going to be able to foresee what should have happened. But I think everyone listening to this and having watched what's happened recently in terms of the goalkeeping situation, no one's turned around and saying, well, we had an issue with goalkeepers last season. Now, I personally don't think that we should have extended McGregor's contract, as I've said that before. I think that we need to do better in terms of having a defined number one. Because I think that the goalkeeping situation is something which highlights very well where we're at the moment. It feels a lot to me, Stevie, and I'm keen to kind of get your thoughts on this, that we have players for a particular position and they can do some elements of that position and what's required. And then we have the other player who can do the other side of that particular position and those elements that are needed. So it's like one can do 35, 40, 50% of the job. The other can do the other 35, 40, 50% of the job. But yet we can't play both players in one position. So I suppose really what I'm saying is I'd love it to be the case that we could bring in someone who is a definitive article. I've read a lot around the Tillman aspect of, well, why should we develop another club's player for him simply to go back if we're not potentially going to sign him when we could be developing our own players? And that's a very worthwhile argument. I do understand that. I don't expect players to be able to come in and hit the ground running, but what I don't want to see us doing, and this might be where we're at with Ridvan potentially. I don't know. We haven't really seen a fair crack of him. Matondo certainly, where we're bringing in project players that we think that we can continue to develop, and that's fine if you've got a first team reliable performer in front of him who can be there, so that if you can play the second select in cup games if there's an injury and needs to be able to try and bring in cover, as we've probably seen more so with Leo and King. That's fine if you've got a regular starter ahead of him. And for centre half, right wing, I don't believe we've resolved those issues. And those issues have been there for at least a year. At least. And I think that's where I've got big concerns. I don't know if that's maybe unduly unfair. Again, I give the idea that we can't predict certain positions may be problematic. But we seem to have solved the striker one because we had a single point of failure in there. Because as I've said to you before, and I've said many times, no one would be able to convince me that if Alfredo Morelos played in Seville, we wouldn't have been able to win the Europa League. I am absolutely certain we would have won that final. But we didn't have another striker that could come in and step in for him. Cholak has hit the ground running, phenomenal. We've ticked that box. But yet we've still got major issues in other parts of the squad that haven't been addressed.
Yeah, and I think all that's fair. I think it kind of balances what I'm trying to get at as well, with regards to, if you're spending money, we really have to get those right. We could sit here, though, when it comes to the next time we record, in a month's time, heading towards Qatar and the World Cup and stuff like that, and Ben Davies could have played 8 games and absolutely smashed it out of the park, and we'll be sitting here going, well, Gio's played that perfectly. So football can change in 90 minutes. So it's not a case of writing them off. It's more a case of saying that at the moment in time, I would agree with what you're trying to say as well, that that's where people say we've got so many defensive midfielders, and it's kind of right because, if we could merge a couple of them, they would be the complete player. So I get it and understand, and it's a frustrating point at this moment, because the club would say back to us that, a year ago we thought John Lundstrom wasn't good enough, or we thought Calvin Bassey wasn't good enough. So we know how quickly it can change, but we do need to start seeing an upturn in these guys, and it is the comments from Gio are concerning. The refusal to pick these guys is also a wee bit concerning. If it's a getting up to speed fitness thing, etc., I understand that, but I offered him, that was a caveat of midweek when I kind of went at him a wee bit with that question. I said, is it a performance thing? Do you have an issue with recruitment, or are we still at the speed, or are we still getting up to speed fitness wise and things? So that answer was it led a lot to read into, which is difficult at the moment, especially with the noise around the club. And we both know as well, if we had somehow managed to get 4 results, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about why Rabbi Matondo isn't playing. So it's an issue now because we're not performing. But I'm still of the opinion that we need to start seeing a return from our summer investments. especially when we didn't have a lot. We can't be in a situation where we're going into January and needing another 3 or 4 players, as it looks like at the moment, or needing to rectify 2 or 3 positions. So recruitment-wise, it's one that we're going to have to come back to. I think, in 6 weeks' time, the picture could look completely different. But at this moment in time, it's not nearly good enough in terms of where we're sitting. We're probably out of the 7 that got in. We're probably looking at about 50% of being where we need to be, and still the big positions, like you point out, which we've known for the last God knows how long. We haven't spent anything in a midfielder since, in fact, the last time we signed somebody was Charlie McCann. And that shows you. So there's still more questions, Cammy, unfortunately, than answers.
No, listen, I think that's fine, but when we'll wrap up, Stevie, I think to continue asking a little bit more of those questions, because I want to try and look at some larger piece in terms of where the club's at the and I think one of the things that's kind of frustrated me within recent weeks has been, I think that there's been some big issues and some smaller issues that we've not really been addressing across where the support have been impacted. I'm going to kick this off probably from the latest debacle which has happened since we last recorded, not just on one particular occasion, but on quite a few, which was our travel partner with CTM, the club's official travel partner. There were due to be various different flight options for being able to go away against USG, against PSV, and I think the most cataclysmic one was the day trip which was planned for Amsterdam, which had various updates happening as the date get closer to it. For anyone that doesn't know, I'll just quickly kind of explain what the day trip is. For anyone unable to make their own independent way of being able to go over to our European away games, our travel partner CTM will provide same day transport back and forth to the away game. Doesn't include your match ticket, obviously, but you can still apply for that through normal channels at the club. But you typically leave Glasgow early doors, back of 6 o'clock, 6:30 kind of time. You make the journey. You're over in the host city for the vast majority of the day. You hit the game, and then as soon as the game's done, you are on a coach then straight back to the airport. Now, typically this is fairly straightforward. However, Stevie, the Ajax debacle started when the trip was now not flying into Amsterdam, going into Schiphol, one of the world's largest airports, but was going to go into Belgium instead. And then those on the trip were going to be bussed from Belgium into the Netherlands. That then also had the added incentive of you weren't going to be returning back into Glasgow, you were going to be flying back into Prestwick. And then I think I'm right in saying about 12 hours beforehand, with people in hotels at Glasgow Airport, CTM announced that they were then cancelling the trip. Now, I'll also put that into, as I said to you beforehand, the really large problems such as that, because these trips typically are about £600 to £700 as an outlay, and you'll take up to 3 to 5 days to get that money back, which means that even when you're committed to it and they cancel it, it's such short notice, you basically then have to spend the same amount, if not even more, having to rearrange it and be able to get there independently. And as we all know, airlines are pretty much will gouge you for prices the minute that your fixture is announced, because they know that prices will go through the roof because the demand will increase. But then I'll take you on to something else as well, Stevie, that happened during the Ajax game, which was as we were getting roundly turned over by Ajax, in the second half, payment started to come out for the season review of our 55th league win, which was disastrous timing. And I think for me, there's been a number of other issues as well in terms of being able to try and sort out Champions League tickets at Ibrox. People were having major issues with that. They've had issues in terms of MyJair's access for being able to try and get some of those tickets. We're now at a stage as well where I believe that the club have reopened the ticket office for staff to be on site for supporters to be able to get in to deal with that. On Wednesday evening, I know of at least one lady who has 3 season tickets in, I believe it's the main stand. Her husband and daughter all went up to their usual seats, or tried to at least, because they were then had issues being able to get access at the turnstile. They were able to get into the stadium. They got to their seats only to find a gentleman sitting in their seat who bought it from part of the return tickets when we obviously weren't going to have any away fans in the stadium. Tickets became available. Apparently he bought it in that sale. So, and there's picture evidence of this that she was able to provide us, that the one seat with an Ibrox was now sold for £130 because it had been sold twice. Things like this need to be able to try and get addressed. And I suppose I wanted to put it to you, Stevie, in terms of what we've spoken about within the club of really small but also very large problems that just seem to not be able to get addressed. Now, I'm not suggesting that Stuart Robertson should be the guy who should be turning around and dealing with all of this. I don't even necessarily think he should take a board member. What I do think, however, is that someone somewhere within Ibrox at a pretty decent level has to turn around and say, we will get these problems captured, we will get awareness of them, and we will sort them. I think CTM should be removed immediately as a club travel partner because it's been a litany of mistakes from them. But it's just the other things, Stevie, that just it starts to exasperate the goodwill that this board has. And it does have a lot of goodwill, it has a lot of support from people. But when you start getting really pissed off because you can't get tickets into a game, or because your ticket's been sold to someone else, or because, like I say, you can't speak to anyone at the ticket office because maybe going through to Ibrox, taking a half day from work isn't convenient, it just feels to me like these things are what really rankle supporters and just really get them into a stage where they feel like the board and the club are not listening.
Yeah, and I think that's totally fair. When you don't address the small issues, they become big issues. And if you look at the things that have happened in the last 6 months, Australia, then we had the whole public press release things, rump fans and all this stuff. Fan engagement, customer service, ticket office, club website, travel European partners, Castor, Edmondson House, Champions Wall, Safe Standing, Disabled Access, Miziers. This is all things that people have complained about. Now, these are all, how do I put this? Because it's not minor points to people, but in a bigger scale of our club, they're minor things. But when you allow a void, people will fill it. And if most times you fill it with nonsense. But as a club, we need to be far more proactive in terms of our engagement with the support. And I don't mean lip service of a few fan engagement things. I mean properly having people that are accountable, and you can say, right, oh, you've got an issue with tickets, etc. Go and speak to that person because they'll sort it for you. And if they can't, they'll flag it, but you'll get an answer and get somebody to help you immediately. If you've got an issue with the club website or the ticket office, stuff like that, go and speak to this person. The problem is, at the moment, there's a complete disconnect. We get people coming on and asking us on social media, how do you sort this problem? I don't know what to do and I don't know where to go. It's not fan media's responsibility to act on behalf of the club, but we end up doing it. And there's certain people on Twitter that provide probably more information for the support than the club do, and that's not a good look. And when things go wrong on the pitch, because ultimately little problems off the pitch, nobody cares if you're winning on it. So I'm sorry, that's just the blunt truth of it. But when you go through a spell where we have done, and it hits the rock somewhat, and you suffer a few big defeats, especially against them, then people will start snowballing, and people will start overreacting, and people will start pulling it all together and saying this club's just a mess. I don't think this club is a mess, but I think it's disconnected from the support. That's something that I'd tell the club if I'd sat right in front of them. Now, I don't think there's any argument over the travel European partner. They should have been binned last year. The stuff that went wrong there, they should be gone. The club had an instant easy win there a couple of days later by saying that arrangement's finished, that arrangement's over. They should have come out and said they should have dealt with it. We've then created 10 days of silence or 2 weeks of silence, whatever it is, since Ajax, and people are still pissed off. Then you get other wee moments like, the ticket website, people not being able to log in, people, errors on the basket, having to tell people to clear and log back in and stuff. It's simple stuff. And there's like, who do we speak to about this? Who do we go to? There's a real disconnect, and that has got to improve. As I said, I'm not going to sit here and complain and 2-foot people and say, but there's got to be more engagement. Since Australia, when there was that whole mess, Cammy, over Australia, the press releases and stuff like that, and stuff from the boardroom, this club has been silent. We have sat for 6 months and not spoke to anyone. Now, you know that my wife is a season ticket holder. She's had a season ticket for 20 plus years. She said to me just last week, I can't remember the last time I heard from Stuart Robertson. Now, Stuart Robertson doesn't need to be there every week saying, oh, it's okay, Stephen, we're doing this, we're doing that, out in the press. He doesn't need to do that, but he needs to be more than what he was, but he needs to be less than what he was at the start of the year. We have struggled to find that balance. That's where we are for me. Proper leadership from the boardroom, from positions. I'd like to see more of that. I'm led to believe we are going to see more than that. So that's a positive. They do, as a boardroom, having had dealings with them, they do seem to accept the points that are made to them. They're not anti-criticism in terms of sitting there thinking that everything's wonderful. So I hope that these things, and people see the fan engagement stuff that is coming through in emails and people think, oh, it's pointless. Please fill them in because it's really important. But as a club, this is my big issue, Cammy. I think what you touched on is correct. Sort the small issues, bridge the gap for communication to the support for various things, various easy wins, customer service. You start improving that, and very quickly you'll get an uptake in mood and an uptake in how we're feeling. And then maybe when things do go wrong, you won't get such a dramatic reaction because it's all tied into one.
Yeah, and I think you're right in terms of the element of I don't want to 2-foot people. I don't think, for example, that the ticket issues that we have are the responsibility of the SLO. I don't think that people having issues within my jails mean that the system is perfect, because I've spoken to the people behind my jails. I've spoken to people at the club in terms of the various different endeavours that they're trying to put out in terms of the project stuff and all that kind of thing as well. What you need is I think, like you say, someone to take the responsibility, someone to be able to then say, look, if so-and-so has had an issue, then we've taken it from there. We will deal with it. We will pick that up. And as I say, I don't think either of us, Stevie, are really suggesting for a minute that, we're downplaying someone's issue by saying that it's a small thing and it's in the grand scheme of things. Of course, it will be personally important to them. We totally get that. But that's why I wanted to raise it, was because there's elements to within this, because, I'm very, very opposed to this idea of, like Dave King coming out every 20 minutes and criticising something to do with the board. The board have got us where we are in terms of the success that we are enjoying and have continued to enjoy over the last number of years. Those will be fulfilled, in my opinion, in bricks and mortar, with obviously New Edmondson House. Finally, a club museum, which I've only been asking for the business end of the majority of my entire life. Things like that. But that being said, there are also things that we can deal with now. And I think the frustration I feel with them, Stevie, is I actually think that they're quite fixable. I actually think that some of them could be quick wins. And as a support, we're patient. Whether people, I know we've spoken a lot, certainly across the course of this show, and in terms of the reaction with it. But I actually think, by and large, as a support, we are pretty patient, and we will accept the fact that things won't change overnight, or we can't come up with an immediate solution, and so therefore it's it's a take it or leave it scenario. I think most people would understand that if something has went wrong or something is a problem and it needs fixed, just tell us that you're fixing it and come back to us in the later on with an update. It doesn't mean that I demand huge levels of compensation and all the rest of it and stuff as well. Do you know what I mean? It's because, again, you make us feel like fans and not customers. And I think that that's the most important thing. And many of us of a certain vintage will remember previous Ibrox regimes that you were very much a paying customer. That's all you really were. You being a supporter was a very, very distant second. And that is absolutely not where I'm suggesting the board have got us. But there's easy ways to be able to try and avoid even getting back to that potential scenario as well. So, yeah, as I say, I think it's good for us to be able to talk openly about that because, you know, as you rightly say, is the responsibility within fan media. We have to be able to represent a voice of the fans within that. There are obviously other groups that can do that, but, you know, we can't hide from the truth and the things that we either get raised to us, we see, hear, read about, etc. Yeah, that's not anything that we can make a conscious choice to ignore. Stevie, overall, keen to kind of get your thoughts in terms of everything that we discussed. We're too early on to be able to try and do a report card thus far, but opening period of the season, we've had loads obviously that we've talked about and stuff as well. Overall, how are you feeling? How are you feeling about the kind of upcoming period after this dreaded international break before we head on into the World Cup proper? Are you confident? Are you been happy with what you've seen over the piece? Still work to do. What's your thoughts?
My thoughts are that it could have been a lot worse than it is. Now that's the negative point straight away. But actually, Cammy, we've kind of limped domestically away from home to the point where we're 2 points behind. We've got to galvanise and regroup. We have to get our confidence back, and we have to get through what's a really tough period. At the end of the Champions League group stages, we've got the net in quarter-final of the League Cup, which is imperatively important that we make sure that we get through that with a home tie. League form we need to pick up. Not necessarily at home, it goes back to what we spoke about before, but performance levels have got to be higher. It's a work in progress. I understand all that. I get that, and I get where we are, and I understand it, but it can be better. We can perform better. We can do things better on the pitch. We can do things better off the pitch. So, for me, report card wise, 6 out of 10. And if they had won today, and this isn't, you know, if we were 5 points behind, I probably would have gave you 5 out of 10. We've got slightly out of jail, so we're sitting 2 points behind. In the grand scheme of things of what we've come through this last month, etc., then we're relatively fine. And nobody wants to be second. Nobody wants to drop points at Easter Road. I get that. I understand that completely. And we need to front up and be better in individual performances. So, I think I'm a 6 out of 10. I mean, I've explained my position on the board and on Geo and that, and I don't think that's worth going over. Again, we don't need to repeat that. We need to be better on and off the pitch is where we are. If we have, you know, you quite rightly pointed out, Rangers never start well. So if we go through what we think and hope, and history has told us that we'll begin to hit form and put results together, and I know that Champions League is going to disrupt it, but we need to go to Tynecastle and win. We need to start getting domestic form together. If we can rack that up, then things will look a lot brighter than they are now, potentially performance-wise and things like that. So let's hope for better, and positively, if we can get where we are now up until the World Cup in not a worse position, then this isn't mean to it'll probably sound defeatist, but it's not meaning to sound that. What I want to see is a string of performances, a string of results. But what I mean by not being in a worse position is we can't control what they do because we can't play them. So you take it just as they do their business. From us, if we do ours and hit that form and hit that run, start getting the confidence back in, start getting the players performing, your likes of James Tavernier, your likes of Ryan Kent, start getting them back up to the levels we know we are. We're a good side and we can do good things. So I'm looking forward to the break that we've got now. Hopefully we can regroup and get back together as a squad, etc. And then I'm looking forward to coming back and hitting the ground running and getting these results and building them up. The players should be sitting there thinking right now that it's not game on again, but it should their mentality should be that, you know, we've got through a really tough period. We've got a good 3 points yesterday, albeit it can be better. Let's kick on and that's exactly where I am.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with all of that. I think I would probably say I'm midway. I'm probably about a 6 out of 10 at the moment in terms of where things are at. I think I want to look at it positively in terms of saying, we do have signings that have yet to make an impact. So let's see what they can do when they're given a fair crack of the whip. We need to allow players time to settle. Not all of them are going to come in and hit the ground running, like obviously Cholak has. But we've got the opportunity there to be able to try and provide more. And I think, and as I say, I don't want to spend any real time talking about them as well, but I think from what you've seen against Celtic dropping points in Paisley, Stevie, is the fact that it's probably felt like a long time that no one could have laid a glove on them. I think that they were a day shy of going a year unbeaten in a league, but I think, to use the phrase now, that we now see that they can be got at, and I think other teams will start to see that. So, again, it might take a little bit of the wind out of their sails, but equally we need to get the wind back in ours. And the phrase I've used a lot is that old Glasgow terminology of swagger. We've needed to be able to try and get a bit of strut back in our step, and I'm not saying that from an arrogant perspective. What I mean by that is being able to go out there and actually show that we are an incredibly strong team, an incredibly dominating team when we want to be, and being able to go out there and get some really strong and solid results that I think, like I say, we'll be able to put out a few statements about. And that, for me, you're absolutely right, starts at Tynecastle once the break is over as well. Stevie, as always, it's been a privilege to be able to talk to you. Can you tell me, please, and tell the people listening as well, where they can read a bit more from yourself at Four Lads?
Yeah, so simply go on to any kind of your search engines and you just type in Four Lads Had a Dream, all one word. The word 4, not the number 4. .blog, stick that in and it will come up. You can subscribe. I think there's way up to 90,000 people who get the emails to them, so there's a high percentage there. You can get that sent to you as soon as, or you can follow us social media, Twitter, Instagram. I think we're even on TikTok now, Cammy, which is not my forte. I can't do all these videos, but we've got a nice guy, Gary, that does these things for us, and so we are basically on your social media. Four Lads Had a Dream, all one word, and you'll find us. And it's basically me, I try and do the match reports, the press conference stuff. We try and cover a bit of the women's team, a bit of the B team as well, and we try and bring you all the latest news. Just like yourselves over at Heart and Hand, we work quite closely together, and we try and do our best. So come and follow us, come and read what we do, and hopefully people like it. And it is, sorry as well, just to say, it's not a subscription service or anything like that. It is free, and you don't have to. You can come and read it for free and enjoy it. And if you want to, if you fancy blogging, or you fancy writing about stuff like that, please get in contact, because it is only me, and I will take, if people are looking to start that kind of thing, maybe students and things, Cammy, then please come and speak to us. fourladshaddadream.blog, and we will get you sorted.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you'd enjoyed today's show and you'd like to hear a little bit more from us at Heart and Hand, please jump over to our Patreon site, which is patreon.com/Heart and Hand. You can get up to 5 shows a day, depending on your subscription levels. And we will have our regular free shows, the flagship on a Monday with David and guests. And usually towards the tail end of the week, Heart and Hand Extra with Adam as well. And if you'd like to be able to check those out, they will be back with you in the run-up to the return from the international break as we hit the road to Tynecastle. Stevie, a pleasure to talk to you as always. Thank you so much for your time. I love talking about all things Rangers with you. And I just, as I say, really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you again once we have a few more games under our belt, and we'll be back in with the relay.
Yeah, absolutely. It was due to kind of holidays and things. It's slightly longer gap than we wanted, so we will be back quite soon, hopefully in October time to speak again. This has been quite a long episode, which I appreciate as well. I hope people have enjoyed it. It's certainly a pleasure to talk to you, Cammy. We all want what's best for this club, and everybody that's listening will feel the same. And feed it back to us. Let us know what you think. Are we not strong enough? Are we Are we too critical? Feedback. What would you like to hear on the shows and things like that? Because this is a broad platform and we are open to covering what you want to hear and also trying to find out what you want to know. So please let us know, and I hope that you enjoy it and come back and listen.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Do as best you can to try and enjoy the international break as well. The real football will be back before you know it. But in the meantime, as I say, jump onto our respective sites to be able to try and get your fix for all things Rangers. Stevie, a pleasure again as always. Thank you so much, my friend, and we will be speaking to you again very shortly. Have a great international break, folks, and we'll speak soon. Bye-bye.